Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home, where we would love to have you listen in on our conversations. Remember to always catch up. This is a channel for women, empowering women to take inspired action to create the life you want. With your hosts, Shanda Soretti, certified coach, and Carla Center, subconscious healer. And today, I love how we just come up with our topics right before, and it is to have an agenda or to not have an agenda? That is the question. So you want to start us off, Shanda?
Sure. I think that this is really exciting. And like Carla said, we were kind of just naturally talking about this. And then we were like, hang on a second. Why don't we press record and see what comes from this? So, what we're talking about here today is having an agenda, right? So the big question being, should we have one or should we not? And we are not talking about having an agenda like a schedule or anything like that. By all means, have an agenda. It will help you remind or remember things that are really important. So please have the agenda. What we're talking about today is having an agenda within the ideas of relationships or even a coach client relationship. And that's actually, I want to share this. This is actually kind of where this conversation evolved from, right? We were talking about how, as coaches, it's really important to not have an agenda, as counterintuitive as that seems, with your clients, right? Meaning simply, we have no place to try to get them to. We're simply facilitating a space to allow their genius to come online.
Right, because the genius comes from you.
Mm,
Like it's all in you. We're just guiding you through, and we have great tools. But if the agenda is ours and we're like, this is exactly where they need to go today, then that it has to do
mm,
with what's inside of us and is not the best thing. It will take you to places that later you're like, how did I get here? This is not really what I desire for my life. And I'm sure Shanda's had it. I had it when I first started. I wanted it so badly for people that I would take them and we could release great things, but it wasn't where they needed to be at the time. And so not having an agenda really allows for what else is possible. Shanda and I talk about that often, like
mhm.
going into the unknown. And if we have an agenda, we're staying in the known. We're staying in what we know about the client and what we know about ourselves. And I love that really when you connect with a client, it goes places, and some of the most powerful sessions come when they have no idea what they want to work on.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, it's interesting too, because as a coach, when we release the reins, right, meaning we're not trying to steer them in any direction, we're just guiding them along the process instead, it enables or it allows for really transformational breakthroughs to happen. Whereas if we were trying to control the coaching session, it would not have landed there, right? It might have went somewhere else, but it's I learned early on that using my intuition when coaching is like key. So if I hear a question in my head, like, ooh, explore that, ask this, that's what I do, right? So, in the beginning of coaching, and I'll just be completely transparent to build up my confidence, I had processes like sessions that I would take people through in a specific order. Now, they still got transformation, do not get me wrong, but the transformation that I'm able to facilitate today is much different than the transformation I was able to facilitate 5, 6 years ago. And I love that so much because this you can relate to this to anything. The more that I grow as a person, as a coach, the more that I can bring to my clients, and that the door swings both ways. So as a client, the more growth you do, the bigger results in your life in all different areas too, right?
Right, exactly. And if you go in, I was the same way because that's how I was taught is this is how our
Mhm.
sessions need to look like. This is what you need to do. Excuse me. So when somebody comes in and their needs do not fit into
Yeah.
that, then the session is like, you are not supporting them. And we want to teach our clients to use their intuition. So when we're not using ours,
Hmm.
how are they supposed to learn to use their own? Because it's very much ingrained in us to not trust ourselves.
Yeah.
And when when we have an agenda, we're not trusting ourselves and we're not trusting the other person,
Yeah.
whatever relationship.
Yeah, and actually just shifting gears, there's a lot more that I could say about coaching, but I actually want to take it into relationships too, like we had talked about in the beginning there. Um, when we when we have an agenda in a relationship, like we're trying to get someone to do something, I think what we need to do first is realize the only person we can control is ourself. Always. There is no matter what, okay? The only the only exception I would say is like a baby or a toddler. And even still, we can't make toddlers do certain things. That's why they throw tantrums, right? So we need to understand that we only have control over ourselves. And when we're trying to control anything outside of us, it's not coming from a place of love, right? And it's actually coming from our own insecurities that we're projecting. So it's almost like if you feel like you're trying to control someone or you're trying to have an agenda, stop for a moment and like ask yourself, what's behind this? Like, why do I feel like I need to control this person or situation, right? Why do I feel like they aren't capable of having that own discernment for themselves, right? And where does this stem from? Do some digging.
Right, because it actually puts walls up when we have an agenda and we're trying to steer people towards what we believe we want.
Hmm,
What we believe often an agenda in a relationship has to do with something we were taught we need to do, need to have to be worthy.
right.
And then we put up that wall between us because we can't really connect with somebody when we're so much into that, because we can only grab the information that filters, is this meeting my need for this agenda or is it not?
Hmm.
And it keeps things from having like that true connection that you can have with somebody, like Shanda was saying, love or compassion. Maybe one of the reasons something's not going the way you planned it to is there's something else going on with the other person. But if you're not having compassion and open to what else is possible in the relationship, you're not going to completely understand where they're coming from because you're trying to control what you can't control.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That whole compassion and empathy piece. It's like when we feel the need to control, what if that's just kind of the universe telling us, like, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to approach this situation with compassion and understanding and try to see things from their perspective as opposed to um, use or put or force your ideas onto somebody else because that's what it is. We have our own beliefs and values, and so does every single person. And that's the base from which we operate. So, no two people have the exact same operating system. It's just not possible, right? Our operating systems are built on experiences and stuff like that, things that we're exposed to. And then we kind of use our own discernment to take on what we feel is true for us and move forward. That being said, we don't always take on the best values for ourselves, but we do at the time, right? At the time, those values absolutely served the purpose they were meant to. So that's why I think a little bit of a side note here, um, always evaluating your values, right? We talked about values a couple weeks ago, but always revisiting your values and your beliefs, making sure, check in with them. Like you're allowed to update all of those things. They're your operating system, right? We're not meant to operate on the same system we had as a 2-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 25-year-old. We're evolving and literally our entire support system needs to evolve with us, right? Without agenda.
Right, right. And when we have agenda, we don't, first off, someone else's experience, even if they, even the people that lived in the same household as you
Yeah.
growing, their experience is different than yours because their perspective is different. You don't know, little things happen that we don't understand. So when we have this agenda and we are guessing what people are thinking, because that's the thing, that was one of the first things my boyfriend told me when we started dating. Do not guess what I'm thinking, because I'm probably not thinking anything. And I laughed at him, because women, as women, we can very much like try to guess what somebody else is thinking and put that on ourselves, which, by the way, that's mirror of our own
Insecurity.
insecurities. So,
Yeah.
but we have to understand, okay, this is our experience, and have empathy and understand that somebody else's experience, even if it sounds like it was exactly the same as ours, it's not. The perspectives are different. How we process it is different. And when we have an agenda, we keep ourselves in a box.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's funny because for some reason we have this idea that we have to be enrolled, or we have to like, or we have to, you know, understand even somebody else's um point of view. And it's like I believe we don't have to even necessarily agree with it. We
Right.
just have to allow them to have that experience and be okay with them not having the same experience as us. If we can just simplify it, distill it down as simple as possible, it's like, I'm going to allow Carla and every single person in my life to have their own experience, and I am going to be okay with that. I am not going to try and control it, because the moment I try to control something outside of me, then all of this distress, discomfort, dissatisfaction, all of these negative emotions are available to you at that point,
Right.
right? So it's like, let it go. This is a theme for my son right now. We're like, we're gonna let it go. Water off a duck's back. It it's okay if somebody doesn't share the same values as you, right? So long as they're not trying to hurt you or something like that, it's okay. Let them do them and you do you.
Right. Right. And the beauty in that is we get to grow, and maybe we can learn something from their values and vice versa. Instead of, we get, as Shanda was saying, the negative, we get into the the shame, the guilt, the I have to be right, by the way,
Mm, yeah,
and those things that Shanda's like, oh,
I am. Because you'll remember from leadership.
yes,
You
the
can
things that block
be
us.
you can be what, or you can be what? Do you remember?
I was trying to think of it right before your face lit up.
You can be right,
Yeah, or you can
or you
be,
can be happy,
yeah, that's right. It's right or
right?
happy. I couldn't remember. I just knew that being right, it keeps you limited.
Yeah,
You're
it's
just
like,
gonna fight for your point of view. You don't see anything
yeah,
else.
it's the
There's
agenda, right?
yeah,
The right is trying to prove something, but it's like there's nothing to prove, right? Like, what if there's nothing to prove? Because how can two people with two totally different operating system prove anything? Like,
right,
it's just like, if you're proving anything, you're proving that you're different. And again, that's okay,
yeah.
right?
Right. And it's beautiful because we are all different. We just don't
Yes.
necessarily acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And your life is so much happier. I can tell you guys from experience, when you go from trying to be right, because you can only see very small what's going on.
Mm,
The picture is so narrow when you're trying
mhm.
to be right, because you are not willing to see any other point of view. You're not trying to learn anything. You're right, and um I always see, when I get that way, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a toddler stomping their feet, like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
this is the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And we can catch ourselves in those moments of really trying to like pull the reins, right? And steer something in one way or another, or even just feeding information to someone, right? In a specific way where maybe we're even skewing the details in our favor so we can gain that control again. And it's like, I always like to think and say, we need to, or we get to surround ourselves with people who are different than us, right? Which we're all different, but I mean, like, even to extremes. So, like Carla said, that we can learn things that we would have never come into contact with otherwise, right? Everybody's belief system is different than yours, and some people's belief systems will challenge yours, right? Like, I'm not going to get into religion, but let's just take two different religions, for example. They will, some of them will absolutely challenge each other. And it's like, what if there's room for both? What if there's room for everybody's belief system? Again, it's just, I like to think of it kind of like a breath, right? Creating spaciousness to allow people to just be who they are and not try to muddle with it and agenda them. I just picture somebody with like a book, a really thick, like a book, and just like slamming somebody over the head when they're trying to agenda somebody.
Right. Well, and
Anyway.
that's what it feels like, because how somebody's supposed to learn, and as you speak about religion, I think of that. I mean, how many times do we learn about somebody else's belief system to even not just learn about, but to have compassion for them for where they're
Mm,
coming from. And we don't. Instead, it's like this, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. I don't even want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to
yeah,
understand you.
yeah,
And that's where that agenda comes in, because you're like, ooh, I don't want to hear them because they're wrong.
right. Can I tell you, this is kind of, I don't know if it's relative, but I feel like it is in a sense. This reminds me of like whenever we're presented with new ideas, they're new ideas and they're likely going to challenge our current belief system or identity. So, what I want to kind of create an analogy with is my whole journey so far with healing has been interesting, right? And I've tried so many different things. Some things worked very well, others not. But I remember specifically with the modalities and the tools that worked the best were the ones that in the beginning I was like, really? Like, that's really like that's an actual thing that works. But I'd be like, okay, you know what? What do you have to lose? Let's give it a try. Every time I was like, whoa, I
Right.
downplayed this thing because I didn't understand it or I hadn't experienced it before. Right. So it's like create space, create openness, just be open to something new. Because when your beliefs are challenged, it's like that light bulb moment, that aha moment of, hang on a second, there's something I can learn here.
Right.
So, why on earth would we shy away from learning something by being like, no, I'm smarter than that. I know better than that. That's not true. And be so dismissive. How can we be so absolutely sure? Right. I'm like, my partner makes fun of me often, which is totally fine because it's from a place of love. But I am way more of an optimistic type person than a pessimistic type. And so like I'm not gullible, but I'm like I definitely love to just believe that everything that I'm seeing or hearing is like in a positive way, like a is real, right? Until I'm proven wrong.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, but I was the opposite. Like when I first
Mm.
got into this, because I did coaching with um all logic from the beginning, because I've been doing this for a very long time in a different arena. And so I came from theories and all of this stuff. And then when energetics and all of that got brought in, like I had to really be convinced to try the modality that I use with regressions. And I was like, there's no way. And
Mhm.
then I got convinced because here's all the science behind it. Here's all of this, and I
Yeah.
needed the proof. And so, but where the big breakthrough for me was is when I was more like Shanda and I was open to what else there is, and because I didn't realize that so much is hidden from us. So that's why it's new,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it brings up when sometimes like we might have thoughts like when we feel challenged about something, whether it's a tool, modality, a belief, whatever it is, right? We might a paradigm, we might be like, oh, that can't possibly be true. That can't possibly work. When you find yourself thinking those types of thoughts, I always like to say just go to bat with your brain and, you know, hand back the question of what if it is true? What if it did work? You
Right.
know? And it's just like play tennis or ping pong or volleyball with your thoughts and feed that back. Like question your thoughts with a question, if that makes sense. Question your thoughts with a question. Yeah.
Right. And if you look at stuff like there's so much different, we get in these what is surrounding us, that's what we know, right? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
what we share. And even like I love watching videos about Americans going to other countries because we think everybody does things the way we do. We're convinced like just stuff like to do with how people do meals and how people hang their clothes instead of dry them. But that's how we are in relationships. It should be the way we think it is and not being open to something different because we're like, that's preposterous. I would never do things that way. But then you try it and you're like, hey, now I get it. There is
Mm.
value in this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I don't see there any harm being any harm in learning something new, expanding your horizons, trying something different, right? Again, it's like if we're always unfolding and evolving, that's part of it, right? Is literally trying new things, trying different things, gaining new perspectives. And the only way to gain a new perspective is to do something that we've never done before, think a way we haven't thought before, right? Treat people we haven't before, right? Like it comes down to a lot of ways of being. Like I always like to say that we always feel like on this healing journey, sometimes it's inevitable to feel like we're trying to arrive somewhere, right? To like this final destination of I'm healed. And I don't believe that I don't believe that there's ever an end because that is our purpose is to just keep evolving, which is exciting. And for me, what I've learned is that your end game always changes as you keep evolving and stepping up, right? So what you might have wanted 5 years ago, you likely will want something different because it'll be something more. It'll be like more expansive in
Right.
15 years time or 10 or 20 years, right? So it's like what if we instead of focusing on like what we get in the end, what the result is, what if we focus more on who we get to become in the process, right? And it's like choosing to become the person who creates those types of results. To me, that is the winning. That's the win. The win is stepping into the qualities, the values, the beliefs that someone who already has those things does, right? It's like you're trying on a new identity almost. And sometimes it works and other times it doesn't, which is again why at the beginning I was sharing it's important to evaluate your values and your beliefs. And even further, the work that I do with clients, I will challenge your values and your beliefs because you might tell me A, but I might be seeing B. And so
Right.
I'll be like, well, you're saying this, but you're doing this. So they're very different, which is true. I'll tell you what is true is what you do,
Right.
right? We might say something or think something, but our actions prove our beliefs. Our
Yes.
action proves how we feel and how we think. So take a look at your actions. What are you doing or not doing?
Right. And that's where that agenda thing comes in. Maybe you think you don't have an agenda,
Yeah.
but really evaluate how are things going in your relationships and what's your part in it. Because like Shanda said, you may say that one thing's your value. Why? Because that's been taught to you that's valuable to value that.
Yeah.
But really you don't value it and your actions show that you don't really value it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it reminds me of like, let's just say somebody who says that they are, a high value for them is, healthy living, but yet they struggle or maybe don't even get themselves, I don't want to say gym, but get themselves moving, right?
Mhm.
Or they don't feed themselves with like healthy, nourishing foods. Or they don't give themselves enough sleep, like things like that. It's like, okay, you're saying that it's a high value for you, but yet there is no action to back this up. So it's telling me it's what you want. It's something that you want, but you have yet to prove that to yourself, right? You don't have the belief system or the value in place yet to go make that happen. And again, like working with clients, I love one of my favorite things that we get to do is we work on 3 levels of change, which is beliefs, or sorry, habits, beliefs, and identity. And it's important to cover all of those layers, from one session to another, we bounce all around, but it's important to work on all 3 layers because it's not just the habits that create our results. It's not just our beliefs and it's not just our identity. It's all of them put together. It's like a mixed bag, right? That when you dump out all the pieces, you're like, oh, it's the whole puzzle. But if you just have the individual, like for example, if you only work on habits, you will create results. But if you need to, and we all do, update your belief system, then you're only going to get so far with your habits and you're going to likely fall off the track at some point or other, right? Because again, your beliefs back up your habits and your identity backs up your belief. So it's this whole synchronicity cycle that happens, right?
Right. And if you so if you and also if you just work on your beliefs and your habits, then your identity you feel lost later
Yeah,
because you haven't worked on
exactly.
it. And that's why Shanda's saying, we get to work on all the three. And we have for a long time, people have worked on habits and they've
Yes.
avoided beliefs. And so now
Yes.
we've brought beliefs in, but not necessarily identity. And that's why we're saying, like, if you have an agenda, you're missing something. And
Mhm.
that's how we've gone, even in the coaching industry, because it's been going for a long time. It was habits. Everybody break a habit in 21 days because it started with health stuff, with exercise and everything.
Yep.
And everybody realized beliefs. And then I can tell you from personal experience, you don't work on your identity, then you feel like you're floating around here completely confused as to who you are because
Yep.
you've changed all these other things. And that's why it's so important to be open and learn new things. And that's why things evolve, is because
Right.
we're open to something new.
That's right. Yeah, and as we're changing and shifting, like Carla said, everything has to come along with us. So if we're updating our habits, we need to update our beliefs and our identity. It has to come together, right? Maybe not at the exact same time, but they come along. So it's like I almost picture like a string, a spring. It's like we're working on one thing and it kind of leaves the pack, but then the rest of it comes back, right? And it's like you're like you're you're growing and then you're like expanding and contracting. That's good. Expanding and contracting along the way,
Right.
right? So everything is coming along with you. You're not leaving any parts of you behind. And that's another thing when we avoid things or we don't want to dive into certain things or we're hesitant or we have a lot of resistance. We're like, nope, I am not going there. And it's like, okay, you're not going there yet, but you will eventually, hopefully, open up to wanting to explore there because you'll find out I've been working on all of these areas and maybe you've made some really good traction and you're like, things are going really well, but there's still this one thing. And that's when I would say to you, my friend, remember that thing over there that you up until now haven't wanted to explore? Let's start exploring that so it can catch up with everything else. Right. So, like Carly, you said it so perfectly. For the longest time, we only ever focused on habits, 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 habits. And now we're in the realm of beliefs, which is really cool. The next realm to come is identity. And when more people are having conversations around identity and who we are, right? Answering the question, who am I? What's important to me? What do I value? What are my beliefs? Then we'll start to really see some major kind of like, I want to even say like universal or worldwide uplifting and breakthroughs as a whole, right?
Right. That's so beautiful. And that's what opens our relationships up, right? Like,
Mhm.
all of that growth opens so much up in your relationships. And if you're on an agenda, you're skipping it all. If
Right.
you're When you have an agenda, you're even more likely to not talk about something that's important to you
Hmm.
with your partner because you are fearful of conflict. So you're not even sharing your values completely with them
Yeah.
because this doesn't fit into the agenda.
Right. It also reminds me of like inauthenticity
Mm-hmm.
when we have an agenda. And I mean this because think of this, like this is the perfect example. I'm going to go off what you shared, Carla. When we're having a conversation, let's just pretend we're having a conversation with our partner or spouse, whatever. And we have an agenda, right? We're like, we're going to talk about this and we're going to get here and this is what I'm going to say. And it's like, what if we let the conversation naturally evolve? Where might it go if that were the case, as opposed to being stuck on getting to this answer or finding that solution or making this thing happen? It's like we aren't being authentic because the conversation might want to go here and you're like, nope, bring it back over here. This is what we're doing. It's like you're cutting off from your authenticity every single time you do that. It's like you're limiting the intimacy, right? In the connection that you could be having with that person.
Right. And then you're hearing to respond.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, if we're looking for a specific answer or a specific result, what is that like? What is that saying? Right. I mean, really though, like, what is that saying? And I'm like, it's not, it's just, for me at the end of the day, it's like, it's just not from a place of love. And if we can just practice that more. And even like, listen, you can still find yourself in conversations sometimes when you're like, I'm trying to control. I still find myself there and I'm like, oh, hang on a second. That felt awfully bossy or controlling or whatever. And then I'm able to rein it in because I'm like, okay, hang on a second. This isn't coming from love. This is coming from agenda. Let's release the get to the destination and just allow this to unfold the way that it's organically supposed to happen. Right. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, you're going to learn something pretty prolific in the process if you're open to hearing it.
Right.
Right.
It's all about that awareness, that how
Yeah.
we talk about not judging ourselves. So that it's having that awareness that, like, okay, I don't want to come from agenda. I just realized I am. So how can I shift this conversation
Right.
so that we can be open and see where it goes?
Right. Yeah. So I just want to give everybody who's listening a little step by step. There's only 3 steps in this. I think this might be supportive. So it's like when we find ourselves in the controlling aspect of ourselves, trying to control something or agenda somebody. I like that. It sounds funny. Step number one, like Carla already said, is awareness. Awareness is step number one for anything. We have to be aware and acknowledge that it's happening. Okay. So, oops, here I am trying to control something. Let's press pause on that for a second. The second part is owning it. So it's like, and this is just for yourself, right? By the way, you don't say any of this stuff out loud. You just do it inside, you do it within yourself. So the second part is owning it, like literally owning up to it and being like, yes, I was trying to do this, do that, whatever it is. And then the third piece is the action piece, which is other than the awareness piece, they're all important, but action is major because this is where you shift. This is where you take action to shift away from the controlling and then into the organic or authentic exchange, I guess is the best way to say that.
Right. And that's beautiful. And that keeps us in our power instead of
Right.
giving our power away.
Right.
And then there's not the shame blame game that's going on, but there's like,
Mm.
okay, this is what happened to me. I'm not acknowledging it because somebody has to be to blame,
Right.
but because this is my responsibility,
Yeah.
my choice. And I'm like, nope, this isn't what I want. So here's the action that
Right.
I'm going to take.
Yeah. And the question you can ask if you're not really sure, it's like, do I want to be this person? Right? In this moment, right? It's moment to moment. Do I want to be this person? Maybe you're like, you're really frustrated or angry or whatever it is. And you're like, do I want to be this person right now? And it's like, no, I don't want to be someone who's angry. Then it's like, all right, here's the opportunity to grow and let it go. Right?
Right.
Beautiful.
And that's how you learn from it all too, is like,
Right.
is this who I want to be? Nope. This is not authentically me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Anything else you want to bring up, Shanda?
No, I think I just really wanted to share that little process there because I feel like having a process, after people kind of listen in on this conversation, getting to walk away with like just a couple simple steps to try, right? So, take them moment to moment, take them day by day, and take them step by step. So, just first start with awareness. And once you're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to notice these areas or these experiences or situations where I am controlling, then you can take that next step. And then once you start owning it and you're like, okay, I'm getting really good at owning it, then it's like, let's try and put some action to shifting these. So just kind of take it as it feels right for you. And yeah, and be sure to share how it unfolds, or what your experiences with it. We love to hear your guys' feedback and hear how you're making out with the tools that we offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're in the awareness space, if you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm aware, there's journaling. Shanda and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
You can write down what's going on in your head, and that's how you can find out if you've had an agenda or what possibly your agenda is. And that
Mm.
that helps too. I love your process, Shanda. I can't wait to hear what everybody says when they do it, because that awareness can make such a difference when you do all three steps in our relationships.
Right. Yeah. So work at it, right? I like to say small hinges swing big doors. So it's those little moments, it's those little decisions, it's those little actions that are going to yield the results that you want over time. So don't lose sight of that and don't lose focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for joining us today. We are so excited that you came to listen to us. And if you enjoy our content, subscribe down below, share with those that you think could benefit from listening to our talks. And we are excited to share something new with you next week. Bye for now.